Industrial Revolution of the 18th century was a major turning point for the country. It was the cause of massive social and economic changes. Although it didn't really begin in any one place, the area around Telford in Shropshire is often described as the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution. It had the key ingredients, and the River Severn could probably take most of the credit. It had carved a gorge through the soft limestone hills, revealing layers of clay, coal and iron ore. Mining it was easy. It could simply be extracted by digging sideways. The 18th century ironmaster George Perry remarked, "It was as if nature had intended this place for an iron foundry." It was Abraham Darby who capitalised on the opportunity when he leased the land in Coalbrookdale and established his blast furnaces for smelting iron. Traditionally, iron was smelted using charcoal, which was expensive to produce and required large amounts of timber. Although there were plenty of woodlands in the area, most had been rented out, and there was little available for the furnaces. Instead, Darby developed the technique of smelting iron with coke made with low-quality coal, which created high-quality cast iron with fewer impurities and at a much lower cost. Initially, he simply created pots and cauldrons, but later his foundry cast cylinders and other parts for steam engines. It was the grandson of Abraham Darby III, who further refined this technique and, in an attempt to showcase the many possible uses for the metal, arranged to build an iron bridge across the gorge of the River Severn. It was the first bridge to be fabricated entirely from cast iron. And today the bridge stands as a symbol of the industrial period. The bridge opened on New Year's Day 1781, and Darby's publicity stunt was a success. Many railway bridges were subsequently built using cast iron. Some were more successful than others. It seems that not all designers understood that cast iron is very brittle and can only successfully be used when under compression. However, the low cost of producing the iron fueled an expansion in all types of buildings. Slender iron pillars could easily replace brick and concrete, and they were ideal for creating open spaces within halls, theatres, and even tall buildings could be constructed with relative ease. Plus, many of the new machines from this period were built using cast iron parts. The water-powered engines, steam engines, and a host of mechanised machinery. Farmers already had a better understanding of crops and crop rotation, and so the introduction of cast iron ploughs, seed drills, and the early threshing machines that could do the work of 7 men with a flail in a single day improved crop production. When steam power was introduced, the threshing machine could do the work of 60 men in a day. This mechanisation of farming caused many to move from a labour-intensive agrarian life to an urban one. The migration of people from farms and villages into towns and cities had begun. Many cities were at first unable to cope with the large migration, and living conditions were often squalid. For hundreds of years, the country had languished, hardly progressing. And then suddenly, over the space of only a few decades, there were steam-driven engines, driving not just machinery, but also carrying goods and people. They replaced the muscles of humans and animals, and output was increased as machines made products cheaper to buy. What were once cottage and handicraft industries became mechanised, and factories were created to make a wide variety of merchandise. The new railways enabled materials to be transferred quickly and cheaply around the country. Fresh produce such as fish could be taken from ports into cities without the risk of going bad. Crops were more plentiful, and they, together with other farm products, could also be sent to markets far away. Water could be pumped to places where previously only streams or wells had existed before, and over time, sanitation improved as sewers were built. Life could be hard, but there is no denying the positive changes that were occurring. Life expectancy had increased, and so too did the population size. In the 18th century, the population of the country doubled, and cities grew even more. In 1771, the population of Manchester was 22,000 people. Only 50 years later, it was 180,000. For many people, the standard of living had also increased. New jobs emerged: shopkeepers, bank clerks, insurance agents, merchants, accountants, managers, doctors, lawyers and teachers. Real wages doubled over the 50 years from 1850 to 1900. The technological advancements led to the internal combustion engine. Energy demands led to electricity and electrical devices, and communications demand led from the telegraph to the telephone and to the internet and computers. And the bridge near Telford stands as a permanent reminder of how it all started, a symbol of the Industrial Revolution from just over 200 years ago. But what if the Industrial Revolution hadn't happened? We probably wouldn't have the technology that we have today. No televisions, computers or smartphones. There would be no labour-saving devices such as freezers, dishwashers, microwave ovens or washing machines. Progress would have been stifled. It might never even have got started. Health would still be in the hands of shamans and herbalists. There'd be no hospitals offering CAT scans, no cancer research, no need for a national health service because there'd be no hospitals. Disease would be uncontrolled. There'd be no effective transport, no cars or trains or aircraft, just the carts and animal power. There'd be no factories making high volumes of low-cost products, and employment prospects would be very limited. All the benefits that came with the Industrial Revolution would be gone. Instead, most would probably still be peasants, tending the fields and leading a life of toil from dawn till dusk. The world we take for granted today was founded by the Industrial Revolution, and the Industrial Revolution was enabled by fossil fuels, coal, oil and town gas. Without fossil fuels, there'd be no Industrial Revolution. Without the Industrial Revolution, there would be little progress. Fossil fuels are inextricably linked to the progress that came as a result of this industrial period, and those advancements include the educational systems and the sciences that have enabled us to become aware of the darker side to those fuels. It's led to a greater understanding of the damage to health caused by smog and pollution, the damage to the environment caused by its extraction, and the connections that are now being made with climate change. It's resulted in the growth of social and political movements determined to tackle climate change by forcing the abandonment of those same fuels that help create the world we live in today. They're noble ambitions, but are they realistic? There's compelling evidence from global consumption patterns that we're still highly dependent on fossil fuels today, and we may be for some time to come. Renewable energy is not reliable and still in its infancy, whilst nuclear energy has its own environmental issues, and, as yet, there are no other viable alternatives. Advancements in technology should lead us to the next generation of energy sources that are both clean and sustainable, but we're not there yet, and we need to be able to bridge that gap. The fact is, we don't actually know what will happen to society if we were to now abandon fossil fuels, and yet that's the path we're headed towards. Can our society continue to grow, or even exist, without those fossil fuels in the near term? But what if we have overlooked the real problem? What if it's not CO2 or climate change that are the biggest threats to the planet? What if the biggest threat to our planet is simply the overpopulation of humans? Unlike climate change, population control is not something that politicians can easily hang their hats on. It's certainly not going to be a vote winner, and clearly even our recent Prime Minister, who has fathered 7 children, doesn't seem to be particularly concerned about it. Maybe he should. After all, expecting the planet to support 7.8 billion humans without having a negative impact would seem to be both unrealistic and naive, as does not directly raising the issue of overpopulation as a global concern. The Industrial Revolution gave us many things, including longer life expectancy and rapid growth in world population, but it didn't automatically increase our intellect. Removing access to fossil fuels without first fully appreciating humanity's continuing dependence upon them, and without a viable alternative, doesn't seem to be the most sensible of actions. The final irony might be that we discover it's not the planet that is at risk of dying. It's us. The prospect of turning back the clock to times when food and shelter were not readily available and causing increased human suffering with resultant population reduction might well be the ultimate consequence of this action. After all, ours wouldn't be the first civilization to have arisen and then to have fallen back by the wayside. The iron bridge over the River Severn Gorge in Shropshire has stood for over 200 years as a reminder of how the Industrial Revolution started and of the ingenuity and imagination of those who inspired it. It would be tragic if this period of rapid human progress is followed by an equally rapid decline caused by lazy idealism, and the memory of the Iron Bridge and what it stood for is ultimately forgotten.